Next up, accessories. All of these, what I call accessories, power steering, alternator, air conditioning, and this fan for the radiator and general cooling. This is all driven off the harmonic balancer, which bolts to the front of the crankshaft down at the bottom. I'm not going to take everything apart, so you'll just have to take my word for it. This bolted connection between the harmonic balancer and the crankshaft has been a real source of trouble for this 3-liter V6 as the years have gone by. In fact, the bolt has been recalled a couple times. Mitsubishi has had to redesign it a couple times because it's not a keyed connection onto the crankshaft. It's just flat harmonic balancer bolted on flat with a big bolt. And they're known to either loosen off or break off. Our van in Mexico had the bolted connection loosen off, and now it doesn't. It's worn itself and it doesn't run true anymore, which is pretty annoying. So make sure when you're changing your timing belt that you replace that bolt and put a new bolt on. Make sure it's the new style, not the old style. It's much shorter. And also make sure that whoever's doing the job actually tightens that bolt up to spec, because it's much tighter than your average mechanic feels like it should be. It's doing a real job, which is very different from a lot of other engines and how that's designed. So off the harmonic balancer, we drive this fan. This fan is running a viscous clutch inside, which basically means that it has a fancy silicone oil for life buried in the heart of this fan. And once the fan reaches a certain temperature, there's a little bimetallic strip inside, which will distribute that oil out into some veins and will cause this fan to become stiff within the clutch, at which point the fan turns at full power. Most of the time, we don't actually need the fan to be turning at full power. Most of the time, as you're just going down the highway, just the air blowing through the radiator gives us sufficient cooling for everything. So we don't want this fan pulling a couple horsepower continuously. And I've always been suspicious of these fans and this viscous clutch and wondering if it works properly. Is the mechanism seized up? Did it run out of oil? And I have yet to find a bad one. Any overheating problem that I've come across has not been caused by these fans. So don't get sold on changing it out for an electric fan, because it's probably not going to be as good. And I've heard this from other mechanics who work on Delicas all day, that they just don't see bad fans on the front. So the accessories, it's actually a really simple belting system. On a lot of vehicles, there will be one belt, and this belt goes through complicated, well, it's called a serpentine. It winds back and forth between all the accessories. And on this V6, there's actually 3 separate belts. So there's one belt dedicated for the power steering, and each of these belts has a little dedicated tensioner idler on it. Simple enough. This particular van, I've actually deleted the air conditioning, so it's all gone. But there's, normally there would be an AC compressor down there with a belt. And then finally, we have a slightly larger belt for the alternator over here. All of these belts are commonly available in North America. There's no reason for any kind of fancy, like importing belts from Japan. You can just get them from Napa. You just have to know the length, and you have to know the number of ribs. So these are 4 rib, and the alternator is a 5. Simple enough. The power steering pump, if you notice any weird noises when the engine is running, if your power steering oil gets a little bit low and it starts to pull air through the pump, that will make a weird growling noise. The power steering pumps, there's actually a sensor. There's a pressure sensor right on the top of the power steering pump. And if this cable, as made by Mitsubishi, is too short, so they all fall off, you can just extend this cable out and plug a little bullet connector into the sensor, and this gives the ECU knowledge that the power steering pump is actually sucking horsepower off the engine. In my experience, it doesn't seem to make any difference. It's probably just one of those things that got added as a feature, but then they didn't end up using it in the software in the fuel injection computer. So it's up to you, plug it in or don't. One of the problems with these accessories, not these accessories, but accessories in particular, is that there's a bunch of bearings here that were greased 25 years ago in the factory. And, you know, they're high quality, made in Japan bearings, but they've just ran out of grease. So, and that's just, eventually the grease will distribute all its oil and it'll be used up and it'll be dry and it'll start howling. If you do suspect that you have a howling bearing on the front of your engine, this van had one on the air conditioning, back when it had air conditioning, you can reach in with a mechanic's stethoscope and just put the pointy bit on the nut that tightens down the, which is just right there, that holds this idler in place. And if you very carefully put the stethoscope on there when the engine is running, you'll be able to hear if that is a source of noise. The other thing that you can do if you're on the road and something is sounding scary is you can just take all the belts off. And I've done this. I had a failing timing belt on a van in Spain, and I wasn't sure if it was a timing belt or not. So the solution was I just took all the accessory belts off. And this is cool because a lot of people, when they look at all this stuff, you know, it's a very busy space compared to other cars. You assume that in order to remove a belt here, you're going to have to take out maybe the shroud, maybe the radiator, perhaps the fan. And it turns out you don't have to take any of that off. This power steering belt, if we just loosen off the idler, and, you know, so we loosen the idler right here, we loosen the screw, back it off, we can just kick this belt off, and then we can move it forward through the fan blades and pull it out. And the same goes for air conditioning. The alternator belt sits behind both of those belts. So in order to get the alternator belt off, you have to remove both of those belts, but just straightforward, take your time. Which is really nice. It's nice that you're able to get in and service this stuff without fussing with removing shrouds and radiators and all of that. And finally, on the alternator, a lot of people, when they're doing a van build, this van is camperized, they think that the place to charge their lithium battery off of is the starter battery. And they don't realize that batteries don't make power. All this battery is here for is to kick over the starter, get everything running, and then absorb some surges during normal car running. But it doesn't really do anything for 99% of the time. The alternator is actually the business end of making electricity on this van. So on this particular van, there's a DC to DC converter behind the driver's seat, and the power to the DC to DC converter connects right onto the back of the alternator, because that's where the power is being made. And one more thing about alternators on these vans. This van has destroyed 3 alternators, I believe. And I've got a buddy with, actually he just sold his van, but exactly the same bumper and 4 alternators down. So in my opinion, the Coastal Off-Road bumper blocks airflow. The original Mitsubishi bumper, the plastic bumper, had some really well-designed ducting, which allows air to flow back and keep the alternator cool. When I first put this bumper on, I blocked the little hole right here with my winch control and then burned out an alternator. And then I cut open this hole here and added a little bit of ducting. And since then we've been fine. But my friend, he has filled these holes with an LED light system on both sides. So that that's a concern. Just keep that in mind that if you are running this bumper, you may want to enlarge these holes or think about the ducting a little bit, or maybe change your lights out, your headlights out to LED to reduce the amount of power consumption. Be careful about using air conditioning because that also pulls a ton of power. Lots to think about.